Hello. Oh, there we are. Okay. Good afternoon. I'm going to call to order our afternoon workshop. If you could please rise for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. We do not have any public input this afternoon, so we are giving the floor to the two of you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Sorry, that was fast, right? You are.
Okay. I just wanted a real quick update on the budget. Go the right direction, maybe. There we go. You guys passed the tentative budget back in late July, and we have continued to go through the budget. We continue the process of finding things that need to be corrected and adjusted. So I just wanted to real briefly go over some of the changes that we have to date. We still have a couple of things that we have to book at the year end. So there still may be some minor changes between now and the final budget. But I just wanted to go to give you a current standing as of today. For the general fund, the changes, the main increase to the general fund was the health insurance expense that was adjusted at the end of the year. And there were a couple of other year-end adjustments for timing of issues, payables, receivables, etc. And we also increased Medicaid for $250,000. This is for the new Medicaid claiming that we're expecting next year. When we spoke with Ms. Neild, she gave us a very conservative estimate for the increase next year. She also said that she feels like that it's going to increase even more as time, but right now we're going through a rollout process, so we know that we're not going to have all the Medicaid income up front as expected. The next one is the special revenue budget. The major differences here are just some changes in the project budgets as they were going through the process of approval through DOE. So we just made changes to our documents, our budget, to match the budget documents that were mailed to DOE for approval. The next one is the debt service fund. The major change there was a recording of the 2017-18 capital outlay and debt service entries. These are the entries that are handled by the state of Florida. They do not actually send us any money here. We do not actually pay the bonds ourselves. This is just a pass-through, but they send us our numbers at the end of the year. So we recorded those numbers, and we also used those same numbers for next year's budget. And then capital outlay. Capital outlay, the major change there is a change to the beginning fund balance for the better. That we received several pieces of revenue. After we did our tentative budget, we received $4.3 million in impact fees. We received another $1.7 million in sales tax proceeds. We received the $465,000 for the CONDS for capital outlay debt service, and we received $441,000 for PICO. So that, along with a couple of other adjustments and a reduction in the transfer to the general fund, netted a $8.3 million increase in the beginning fund balance for this upcoming year. Good news. And then finally, the changes to the internal service fund budget. We increased $4.4 million of local sources. That's not always a good thing because most of that's coming from our general fund. So it's not like we're getting it from the outside, it's coming from here. And then we moved $2.1 million from school board back into central services to reflect it accurately. And the rest of the adjustment to the expenditures is for the unexpected increase in the insurance fund at the end of the year, which we're now covering. That really concludes the majority of the new information. that we haven't covered yet, either in our individual meetings or in the public in the past. At this time, Natalie, if you'll switch over that other document for me. Yes, ma'am, please.
I had asked about, under changes to the general fund,
Mhm.
I had asked in our meeting about the school board and how it was 700,000 and now it's 900, it's $1 million. What's included in that? I think that was what my question was. I haven't gotten back.
The school board's mainly your guys' pay and then the attorney and all of the attorney's fees, legal fees.
Okay, so that's.
And the internal auditor function, if it reports directly to the board, gets reported there, and the external auditor. So, last year, the auditor general was here, but this year, the paid auditor will be here coming this year. The other thing is we reserve $250,000 under your area for the changes in the impact fees, because there's an arrangement that we're going to rebate some fees back. And the way that works is you have to collect the fee, and then you have to pay it back somewhere else, and that's where we put that portion in.
Okay, so that reconciles. Thank you.
Any other questions, board members, about that?
Okay, good. So just briefly, and I know that each one of you have reviewed this document because I've gotten several questions from all of you, but mainly for the public's purpose, I just wanted to have an opportunity to go through it. If anybody has any questions, either you guys or the public or anybody, they'll know the document exists and they can contact me at my office after hours or whenever, not after hours, but after the meeting. And after hours, I'm going home. But I just wanted to real briefly touch over this document, and if you guys want to highlight anything or want me to slow down and talk about anything, just please let me know. The document is available on our website and under the financial transparency area. And it does have an interactive index, so if you see anything here on these first two pages that are in the index, you can click on it, it'll go right to it. It won't work, well, I guess it would, but I can't handle it with this handheld mouse. But there's a message from our superintendent, which is very useful. And then there's an executive summary. It talks about some of the changes in plain language in the budget. It talks about some of the differences, some of the harsh things that we have to deal with. Our revenue's not keeping up with where they should. The Florida legislature is not allowing us to increase taxes along with the increase in property values, et cetera. It talks about the loss in revenue over the years from the 2 mil to 1.5 mil for capital outlay. It's a significant loss if you look at it over the last 10, 15 years, which, could have been used to keep our schools updated. And, as always, as you update your assets, your efficiencies are better and your operating costs go down. So that's kind of significant to our operation. The next page is talking about the trim process, and it had some definitions, some discussion about rollback rate and when the final hearing was. This is the tentative budget that you guys approved. And then I wanted to put in here the fund codes, the object codes, and the function codes, because a lot of times we talk about those and the public does not understand, the differences between the funds and the objects. So I thought it was important that if someone wasn't familiar with it, they could go to this document and read what those mean in more detail. This is the first chart, and it shows the 5-year comparison of the governmental funds, which is the general fund first. So there's your tentative versus the last 4 years' original budgets, and you can go through and see the differences between each of the years. And then each fund follows. There's the food service fund, special revenue food service, special revenue other, the debt service fund, and you can see the big change in the debt service, the $10 million in the transfers in and out for the debt service, capital outlay fund, and then this is by the object code, which is a different way to look at it. So you've got salaries, your employee benefits, purchase services, energy services, material supplies, capital outlay, et cetera. There's the general fund, the special revenue food service, the special revenue other. And then the other funds, the object codes aren't shown because they're only single object code funds, so there's no real reason to show them by object code because they're all single object. The next one is a detail of the general fund revenues, so that you can look at what makes up our federal revenues, what makes up our state revenues, et cetera, our local revenues. So it's just broken out in more detail, and people can look at them across the board and see what's increasing, what's not, et cetera. And we did the same thing for the school. So you can see in the past what was the federal portion, what was the state portion, what was in the local, how much of it, was food service, investment income, et cetera. Same thing with the federal projects, other, that breaks them out by the different type of federal projects there. Debt service, capital outlay. And then I went through and put back in the millage information because that's important. That kind of guides. That's our, the main revenue determining factor for the district is how much we can raise in our taxes from our millages, and also our school taxable value impacts that significantly. And as you can see, our millage has been going down. Our school taxable values are going up, and the combination of the two is how much local revenue we get from our millages. And then at the bottom, there's a 5-year comparison of the FEFP program, which makes up a significant portion of our revenue. Then I wanted to put in a comparison of what some of our other comparable school districts are doing. There are some other districts that have the same number of FTE that we have. However, they typically have a lot larger school taxable values, so it's not really a good comparison between them and us because we're on the lower end of that. Marion County, as you'll see, has an additional voter millage, which gives them an additional $18.7 million. So when you look at the expenditures, you can really see the difference because Marion County versus our county because of that. And so this shows all of our expenditures compared by function. The one that I really like, though, is the next one because it actually breaks it out per student. So you've got the revenue per student at each county. And you can see when you look at instruction, we do $4,957 per FTE, whereas Marion County does $5,320 in the classroom. And that mainly is because they've got that additional $1 million. So that affords them the opportunity to put more money in different places. But to me, that's a good comparison to look at some of the other counties that are similar to our size in our situation. And then the weighted FTE counts by school, and this is important because you can kind of see the trends in our schools, what's going up, what's going down, and importantly, for the public to know that we have to allocate our dollars to our schools, and we do that mainly on our FTE. So that's why it's important, why I felt that it should be in there. We also have our charter schools and our special schools on the following page. And this is our, and we've shared this before, this is our number of units or our allocations at our schools. So that gives us the number of instructional, grant-funded, non-instructional, administrative support at each school. That's elementary, this one's the middle, then the high. And then here is their non-salary budget that goes to each school. We've been asked a couple of times, why is the middle schools taking such a hit with their budgets this year? And that's mainly because of their substitute budgets, because they've had cuts in their number of employees, and their substitute budget is based on their number of employees. So as their allocations go down, their dollar amounts also go down for subs. That's the main difference in those schools there. And then here is the departmental staffing plan comparison. And what we noted after we put this out is there's 21 nurses here that are in department level now. So it shows a 21-person increase. However, those are not new to the district. They were reflected at the schools last year. This year they're in the department, so it's not really an increase to the district. It's just showing them at a department level. We also had a couple of new programs. You had the 6 new mental health positions put in. You also had the guardian positions put in. So when you take that into account, there is a decrease in the department staffing for next year. And then this is the department budgets compared over 5 years. You can see the different projects on the side. And then here's a little bit more detailed. You got the center at the far left, and then you have each project underneath that center. So someone can go through and look at, what we're spending on different projects at different places in the county. And that wraps up the document. So if there are any questions or issues y'all want to discuss about the document, I'll be happy to try and answer them as soon as I can.
Oh, I do. I have a couple questions on the project summaries at the end.
Okay.
I've never understood the robotics and the art. I could give you the numbers. They were on the page 30, well, my page 37.
Your page 37.
But my numbering is different.
Yep.
At
Sorry.
the beginning of the chart, when you first started showing the charts with the project. You have robotics is like 6,000 for the county, and art is like 4,000.
Correct.
I think we're all fans of robotics and art, but what does 6,000 and 4,000 do for 4,200 kids?
I think that's specific to the 9220. We actually also allocate additional funding at the schools for robotics. I think it's about somewhere between $2,000 or $3,000 per school. So this
So why
is
is it there?
just something separated out, and I couldn't tell you the history of that. I couldn't explain that. There's also the $4,000, which is the same. And what we did this year was we had the departments do their budgets like they've done in the past, and then we rolled those budgets up. So if they were approved, we kept them in there.
And then in the same chart, the McKay scholarships, like in previous years, show like 3.5 million, and hospital homebound, I don't remember the number, but it's a lot. And in the last couple of years, they've gone to 0. And I know we still have hospital homebound kids, and I know we're still passing through McKay, so why did those go to 0?
I'll have to look into that and get back.
Okay.
So hospital homebound, what does this?
Where's the second
Is
page?
it-
I always like these charts. It's like my favorite part of the budget.
Is it this chart?
Yeah.
Yeah. The McKay still is there for 3.5 million.
But it goes to nothing.
Oh, it wasn't budgeted that way in the past.
So why are we budgeting it at 0?
Before, what they did was they didn't budget the revenue and the expenditure. We budget the revenue and the expenditure.
Oh, and then net it at 0?
Yeah, so it nets to 0. So it's neutral to the budget.
Right.
The
yeah.
revenue matches the expenditure. For that, now the hospital homebound, I couldn't answer that.
Okay. Go ahead, Mark. Your question.
You got all your stuff?
Yeah. I asked a whole, I sat with him for like 3 hours the other day.
My question, I think, still goes back to art and music, and thinking about how many of these new teachers you have or programs that are brand new. The school hasn't had this either in any recent year or has ever had an art or a music program. And I'm just imagining myself as that teacher, let's say, hired off the street now to go teach art or music, and I walk into a classroom. Where do I get my supplies for that? Because clearly we know the teacher lead money is not adequate to cover that. So would I be expected to go to my principal and say, okay, I know that you've got some money in your school discretionary budget, so can you send some my way, or am I going to be directed to do a fundraiser to try to raise money to outfit my lab, or how? This is where I'm kind of wondering from a district support level what we're doing to ensure that teachers are not just kind of met with, oh, I'm sorry, go out and see if you can find some resources.
So I went to the Education Foundation and asked for some funding to support the new music programs. So each of those schools received $2,000 from the Education Foundation, and then I took a list of just a wish list from them. We were able to cover a lot of it with that, and I'm still working on any other donations that we can get for those programs. But as you know, schools have also reached out. Remember the $10,000 that went to the new art program over at Triangle, and so they've been proactive in seeking some additional funding. And then Scott and I did talk about art programs. For many of them, it wasn't a new program. Music was the one with the greater cost factor. So, they do have some supply monies, and we've basically we've talked to principals. I think Dr. Weisskopf even spoke to them as this question came up to her. If there's a particular need, let us know what that need is, and we'll work to get you whatever you need. But I think that they're, at least the startup right now, they have what they need, and as the programs continue to grow, we'll continue to find funding to support them.
Sure. And thinking about those school discretionary budgets, thank you for sharing what the schools had left in their accounts at the end of the year, and it was really truly all over the place. You had one school that had like half their budget there, and a couple of schools that spent everything they had, plus some. So I'm unsure of how all that tracks or trends from school to school, and I think you've shared that there's kind of an education piece that you're going to, and development piece with some principles about how to address those budget needs moving forward. I just recall a PE teacher who came to me a couple of years ago and said, okay, so I need $400 for new equipment. I'm told to go out and have a walkathon, but is that really the practice? I said, well, actually, I just saw your school's rollover budget, and I saw they still have $15,000. Go ask your principal what their plans are for $15,000 if you could have $400. So, I'm just unsure of how some of this money seems to get stuck at a certain level and doesn't trickle down into the classroom, but I think you shared some direction on that moving forward, so thank you for that.
On that question, one thing I did notice with the school budgets was printing was like zero. Like everyone spent their printing money. So are we not giving enough money in that printing allocation? I mean, obviously they have their sort of general and they could roll that into printing, but every school was zero.
That may have been after we cleaned their budgets up, because we did have some that did not touch their printing at all. And we contacted their bookkeeper, and mostly it was an awareness issue. They did not realize that they had a separate budget for printing. But the printing, my understanding of the history behind that, which happened long before I got here, was that was an additional allocation over their normal allocation, whereas in the past it was all just put in the general. So a lot of them still pull out of their general whenever they run out of their regular printing budget, depending on how much printing the school does.
Okay.
The same was true, we spoke about the STEM or the robotics at the elementary level. There was lots that had that left over. We talked about possibly putting that for STEAM, since we know some schools did art, music, and the others did STEAM and music. So
Yes.
is that something we're going to let them use for whichever program they chose to implement?
Yeah, I have no problem with that. As long as curriculum and superintendent are supported, I'm perfectly fine with that.
So you want to buy a vowel?
Yeah, right. 500. If we could add money to that budget, that'd be even better, right?
Okay.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that, boy, the schools that have leveraged that and have really taken advantage of that over the last couple of years, you show up to the robotics competitions now, and you see how many schools are now in the game that were previously not there, because they thought they had to go raise the money elsewhere, and it's been a good initiative the district has supported.
Yep, definitely. Any other budget questions?
I got a textbook question.
Okay, go ahead.
Budget-wise, just kind of thinking about the heartache that we kind of felt this year in the adoption of science, and we saw this whole menu of offerings, that most of which we could not afford, because we know what we get from the state specifically for textbooks falls way short of what we actually need. Just kind of forecasting ahead, being in social studies, that's a year that's got a lot of reading involved in it, right? So there's going to be some expensive books that goes with that. Are we supplementing the textbook budget this year, or just relying specifically on what the state's giving us for that?
As far as I know, we're just relying on what the state's giving us.
Is there any hidden money you might be able to
I wish.
pull from somewhere to meet those needs? Well, earlier, before the meeting, he was saying he knows how to embezzle from other departments. I'm pretty sure that was a joke. But, I know you're pretty talented as a CFO, so I know that allocation just falls significantly short of what our actual needs are. And I know that in addition to the social studies, we've got some catch-up to do, right? Because we haven't bought all the science from the new adoption. And I'm just wondering what that's going to play out to be when we look at approving some sort of textbooks in the springtime and say, well, there's not enough money there. So once again, we fall short. And when I think about, the fundamental responsibilities of the school district, you got to buy enough books for kids, right? That's like one of the basic things that people think about. So I don't know how we could supplement that. But, I'd love to make that decision less painful this year if we could.
We'll be aware of it.
Well, my question is on this budget, as far as it may become a revised issue because of, once we even approve it, about when we do the FTE count, we find we got more students at this school or whatever, we're needing more facilities like portables or something like that. So will that come out as a revised budget?
Sure. And I'm sure you guys are all aware of this because y'all update the budget, y'all approve budget amendments throughout the year. The budget is organic and liquid. It changes constantly. There's always a big revision after the second count in October and then the third count in the spring. And then, there's always adjustments by the state. They allocate or appropriate a fixed dollar amount. And if the number of students increase across the state, then the per student amount goes down. So, we deal with those adjustments throughout the year. One of the big things, obviously, that we're currently going to be dealing with is, the changes in the schools, difference between who actually showed up and what the enrollment projections were. So,
And I think you hit on something that's key there that sometimes is misunderstood is when we gain more students, we don't so much gain them at the same rate that we would with everybody else already there. That kind of goes down and it's spread out amongst those as well.
Correct.
So, I mean, it sounds good in one end that we're gaining more students, but yet we're losing some in another end. But as Mr. Dodd spoke about the music and the art, I mean, that's something that hits home there as far as also the amount of money that's available for teachers in their classroom to be able to go out and buy the supplies rather than have to take it out of their own pocket. And I know some of that is handled by the state that gives them X amount of dollars, but, that's something that I think we need to look at as well, too, in places. And we may not have the budget to do it right now, or we may, but it's something that I think we need to try to cushion that with our teachers so they're able to teach and not having to spend their own personal money.
Correct.
So.
Anything else? No? Okay, I think we're at the section where we're going to go to our capital plan. So thank you, Mr. Bernard. Thank you, Mrs. Briggs. We appreciate you very much. Ms. Randall, thank you. Up next.
Do I just have two? Wait, what?
I was going to put that on slideshow.
Oh, boy.
Thank you, board members. Oh, there we go. Superintendent, this is not really a full workshop, not a full presentation. It's basically just easier for me to work forward through a PowerPoint than to play with a PDF. So after the last workshop, we met on July 30th, and I know you had some questions and weren't able to finish those questions. So this is an opportunity for you to come back and ask me some more questions. After that workshop, there were a couple of requests from the board members. One was that we color code the plan based on the revenue types that we get and which projects are being spent under those revenue types. So this kind of goes back to that color coding that you're familiar with from the timeline. The sales tax projects and revenue are in that kind of burnt orange color, whatever you want to call that. Impact fee, revenue, and projects are in a light blue, and things that are spent from the ad valorem and other miscellaneous funds are in white. So these first two pages are exactly what you've seen before, except for the color coding. Revenue projections are the same. The recurring expenditures are the same. Recurring expenditures largely come from your ad valorem collections because that is our most flexible source of funding. As you know, impact fees are collected from development to pay for new student stations associated with growth. The sales tax, when we did presentations and sold that to the public in 2015, we had a commitment of priorities, project priorities, that we would spend that on. So that was basically locked up in those project priorities as well. So recurring expenditures, this is exactly what you saw before. The only changes are, there was another request to look at whether we could move the Lake Mineola High School project forward a year. So there's two different versions of the work plan page from your capital plan here. There's the original, which you saw on July 30th, and then there is one where we have moved Lake Mineola High School addition forward 1 year. And for all intents and purposes, it doesn't really, we can move that project forward without any major effect on the plan. It just makes that capacity available that little bit sooner, and it means that we will, for concurrency purposes, projects that otherwise would have been held up and asked for a proportionate share mitigation agreement would then move forward without a proportionate share mitigation agreement. So basically, those are the only differences. As you can see from the color coding on this, some of these projects are sales tax projects. The Cypress Ridge cafeteria, the rebuild of Claremont Middle and Claremont Elementary into a K-8, the reconstruction of Fruitland Park. There's some planning money for Beverly Shores and Eustis Elementary School, and the capital renewal projects, which start to be funded towards the end of the plan. That's major reconstruction, maybe not major reconstruction. It's refreshing of schools that are kind of approaching those ends, replacing chillers, doing some roofing, that kind of thing, replacing flooring. And then the technology infrastructure upgrades, which is basically digital classroom upgrades, and that was also a sales tax commitment. So I think probably I'll just let you ask questions.
All right. Board members?
I got a question about Dabney property.
Okay.
Now we're receiving some funds from the sale
Maybe.
of that, right? Maybe. So those are not budgeted into this plan?
They are not.
Okay.
That is, they have 180 days to close on that. And so, you know, once they're done, that would be about a $700,000 receipt, but that is not budgeted into the capital plan.
Where would that funding actually go? Back into the capital, okay.
Can you talk about the Tavares Elementary relief? Like, where's the growth?
So we are actually starting to see growth in concurrency issues with the Tavares Elementary. And let me pull some information that our other planner.
Tavares Elementary, Tavares Middle, Tavares High.
Where are the kids coming from? That's fine.
Their mama.
Basically South Tavares kind of area. Basically the South Tavares area. There's a fairly good-sized swath of relatively vacant land between, you know, South Tavares, the Dead River Road area, and really Astatula. That's still available for development. If you drive down behind the Publix, the new Publix on 19, there's quite a bit of development there.
Yeah,
There's
okay.
also a fairly good amount of multifamily development that's taking place behind the hospital that's actually zoned for Tavares Elementary. In July, I told you there may be changes to that, because if the Tavares Pinecrest School comes in and opens when they say they'll open, then we probably will not need that school within this 5-year period, in which case that money would probably then be transferred to a new school in the South County area.
Now, the Pinecrest one isn't, like, Estes, is it Estes? No, not Estes, Etowah, was talking about putting in
It's
a charter
in
also.
that general area.
Right.
I don't know whether it's, the same exact thing, but I believe it's close to the hospital. So
But
it's in
that's
that
not the
general area.
Pinecrest charter, right? Those are separate things?
I was not involved in those discussions, so I don't know whether they're separate or whether it's really the same, the same group.
No, not, I don't think it is.
Etowah.
Etowah.
I think it's the same thing.
Behind the
Avalon,
hospital,
Avalon.
Behind the
on
hospital.
Lakeshore Drive.
Yeah.
That's the same project. That's Pinecrest.
That is Pinecrest now.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
But isn't this the same
It was
discussion
a big
then that we're
part.
talking about?
Yeah, like Dolly Park School.
If Pinecrest opens up in Tavares, then that's not it's gonna mitigate the need for the Tavares Elementary School. Well, we're obviously gonna get to the Four Corners discussion, but we talked about the charter school opening up out there, and we're advocating for having a school there anyway. So what would be the
There's-
difference between the Tavares school, this conversation
There's a-
that parallels that?
There's a much slower growth rate,
Into
and there's a
various.
lot less available land. In the Four Corners area, you're looking at basically having to absorb Wellness Way until we're able to build another school
Okay,
in that
that helps.
area. So it's a matter of degree.
Okay.
And what about the hills of Mineola?
Oh, what-
That based on that plan, we're going to need a K-8 that we're not talking
Yes.
about.
Yes, we will. And if the Tavares Pinecrest School comes through, then probably the money that we have
Switch
set
to
aside for
Mineola.
that would switch to the Hills of Mineola area.
So were you asking us to decide on this one?
Well, you can't vote on it.
No, I know, but you
But
asked
if
it.
there's a consensus on which plan you would prefer that we bring forward, it would come to the,
We can't take a consensus.
Can't take a
We can't
consensus.
take a consensus.
All right, well-
We'd be welcome, we'd be more
Discuss
than
it.
happy to discuss it and then,
and I can, okay, all right.
let's discuss it.
Feel free to
Yeah.
discuss.
What are the negatives for bringing forward Mineola?
There aren't really. I would say.
Well, then I support
That's right.
My recommendation would be that we look at filling that additional capacity through choice rather than doing an attendance boundary. I know you'll all be happy to hear that.
Seriously.
But basically, that will allow us more flexibility down the road as the Hills of Mineola and that area develops. We won't then have to come back and do another attendance boundary adjustment. So basically, we would do some choice, allow students to go through there, matriculate through, and then as the area grows and develops, then we would have students from that attendance zone who would be
I
able
am
to.
shocked at how many houses they can fit in that one area. I was driving down the road behind Grassy Lake, and they've got the whole next section ready to go with houses. I about fell over.
We are actually very surprised.
It will be, it's crazy, that was crazy.
We're very surprised that the Hills of Mineola has not taken off quite yet, but I think once those agreements are in place, and it will be out, and my husband compares it to a pebble in a pipe. Once that pebble gives way, it's all coming very quickly.
So that K-8 that we're talking for Hills of Mineola, is that like 1,200?
It would be probably about the same size. We would look at a prototype size, 1,200, maybe a little bit expandable. So yeah, it would be about the same. And obviously that, 23,000 or 23 million that we have budgeted there would not necessarily take care of that. It would have to roll over for another year. But you would see that next year, probably, next year or the year after.
It's a good point. Other questions?
Very good.
Well, my question would be, the K through 8 that you're speaking about, where would we put it?
So the Hills of Mineola, as part of their Development of Regional Impact approval way back when, had an agreement to give us 80 acres, the Lake County Schools 80 acres. They gave us 60 acres as part or for Lake Mineola High School.
Okay.
At the time that we did that, there was a donation agreement with the owners, the property owners, that they would give us an additional 20 acres, or if we were going to build a middle school, an additional 40 acres. We've, in discussions, have basically compromised at around 35 for a K-8. So, although,
Technically 30, at least 30 is a middle school.
mhm.
Well, it's 30, but then also the way that that lot, the way that they've laid it out to join, say, public park area. So there's some benefit that you can compress.
Right. Okay.
Other questions?
The reason I asked that question, we have 100 acres not far from this
We do.
vicinity.
The road situation there is
It's not good.
still not cleared up. We have had discussions, and this is something that may come back to you at some point. The county has been working with the Turnpike Authority on trying to, so when the Turnpike widens to 6 lanes through there, or 6 or 8, when it widens, they will have to rebuild Grassy Lake Road, Scrub J Road,
Scrub J.
and that bridge across there. And so
Right.
the county has been having discussions with the Turnpike Authority and the city of Mineola about not rerouting so much as reorienting that bridge. So it goes, instead of at the angle that it goes across the turnpike now, it would go across at basically a 90-degree angle, in which case they may come back to the school board, depending on their routing for that, and request a few acres of right-of-way through Scrub J Road. So that's something that's been very preliminary discussions. But
So we don't
just to
know
let
when
you
they're going to
know,
go
we're
forward
working
with
on it.
this?
No, they're very preliminary.
But another
discussions on it.
conversation that's been had is a developer made a call, he was offering $40,000 an acre, about $4 million. And I know that you're keen on land banking, but at some point, if it doesn't have it, and I don't think 40,000 is enough either. by the way.
I would
No.
agree with
And-
you on
and-
that.
And so that's why I haven't even carried it forward, like you need to be doubling that amount. But at some point, we ought to have an honest conversation with where it's located. I'm not sure what we would exactly build.
Well, my one point on that is we spent about $30,000 an acre for that land. When I look for sites in that area, because I've done some kind of comparison shopping to see what's available, the minimum price is generally around $80,000 an acre at this point, and to find something of that size is going to be almost
That's pretty much already
impossible.
cleared.
Hmm?
I
Yeah,
mean, you're
right.
finding either burnt out
That's-
Orange Grove or some wooded area that we got to go clear out.
But it's
Right.
what, 2 miles from Lake Mineola High School? I mean, the reason Lake Mineola High School is where it is because it couldn't get the infrastructure
Right.
there.
Sure.
So.
Because of Sullivan
we
Road.
build another school that's close.
Well, we did
But
elementary.
it's neither here nor
I was
there.
going to say, there's several right there in that
I
cluster.
was going to say, I think the value will only go up.
No, no,
And
but I
so,
think at some
at
point
some
that-
point, it may be worth discussion. If somebody came to us and said, hey, I have this land to trade that's in, a slightly better area for us, I think it's worth that discussion.
High and dry.
High and dry.
Skeet-free,
right.
tortoise is free.
On
Yeah,
a good road
okay.
network with.
Not in Florida.
So we're gonna start building Wisconsin.
Right.
But I think to sell it now would probably be premature.
Yeah, I would just-
So should this plan get approved, it looks like we're spending the $34 million in this fiscal year for the Four Corners School. I have not had the privilege of being on the board yet for a construction of a school, so how does that process work in terms of gathering input from stakeholders? And I imagine there are going to be some passionate people down in the Four Corners area that have some ideas of what they want to see in the school.
So I'll tell you, it's been a long time since we've built a school. So we probably, can build that process
Okay.
ourselves
All right.
and, decide how we want to approach that. We have been in discussion, or we talked to facilities and procurement about trying to identify a prototype rather than going out for a fresh design and spending money that, we don't necessarily need to when there's a lot of other districts that are out there building K-8s that are the right size. Looking for a prototype that we can use from another district, and then basically doing minor customization that would make it work for us. So that's very preliminary right now, and then once we have that identified, we would go through the process of figuring out how we do that, how we, use somebody else's prototype, basically, and then go to the stakeholders to say, what do we need to do to make this work for our needs in that?
If I recall, I think it was maybe a couple of years ago, I saw some sort of draft of ed specs for that
Mhm.
school.
Right,
So
and that's
those come
what
back
we-
for kind of re-review, and, because we've got a new superintendent here, who might have, some strong opinions on
If-
some of those concepts, and maybe a couple of new board members now over
Sure.
time, so.
Okay, well, we can
I think it'd
certainly
be a
have.
discussion
the-
with having to kind of review that and see where we stand
Okay,
before we build it. Cheaper
Yeah.
to do what we want up front versus go back and retro it, right?
right.
The only caution I have on the prototype is, we did prototype for the elementaries of like Sawgrass Bay and Grassy Lake, and we developed some problems from the prototype, especially with the roofs and things of that nature there. So I would ask, can you show me one that works versus just one? You know, because we did inherit some problems there with the roofing and things of that nature there, and we had to go back and fix it. And I think we did finally get it done before we did the last prototype. So,
Right, we had made quite a few changes to get to Sorrento, which, kind of worked for Lake County. So, those would definitely be the things that we would be looking at. Unfortunately, a lot of the K-8s that other districts are building are relatively new. Orange County is building several right now. Unfortunately, we can't go out and tour them, but we will definitely.
well, by the time we need it, they'll have been up and tried.
Not necessarily.
No?
There's one that we like the looks of. Unfortunately, right now, it's just concrete
Oh, no.
on the ground, so we won't be touring that one anytime soon.
Kelly and I had this conversation over the summer, and we were talking about the K-8 and the design, and I was like, we have to wait that long? And she said, oh, we're actually starting a little bit behind to get the plans off the ground and really get some stuff going for it. So it just seems like, well, we're doing this today, so why can't we open the school in August? And, yeah. Right. So lots of work to do.
Well, and
Right,
just to
can we do
comment
that
on it, I
sometime?
think that really, John Carr, as Chief Operating Officer, begins to kind of put those things together, and has been, on looking at best practices, and then we'll be
Yeah.
reviewing an architect. I was on the board when we did Eustis Heights, and the architect did come in and stakeholder meetings, and so there is sort of a process once you begin to get the people organized.
Yeah.
But I know that John's already been doing a lot of research, so I feel very comfortable moving through it pretty quickly.
It's exciting to be having the conversation about
About
building
building
schools.
Yes.
And being able to pay for it. What a
That's right.
concept.
That's exactly right. Any other questions? All right, thank you guys very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
That's it.
I know, we're on the board member comment section. So, Mr. Mathias?
The only thing I'd like to say is it's like Christmas Eve, and tomorrow we'll know whether we get the president or not on the referendum. And I think that the engagement that I've had over the last few weeks has all been pretty positive. There's been, of course, some that isn't, but we're able to address it. And I really look forward to Lake County residents voting, not just for the benefit of the safety and security, but also that we're addressing the real core issue, which is the mental health component. So I'm looking forward to that vote tomorrow.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Burns?
Oh, wait.
Mr. Rupp?
Yeah, I'll defer the rest of my comments till tonight.
Okay.
Okay.
I did want to say that thanks along the lines of Mr. Mathias' comments. Jim Miller has been doing a lot of sign works and has been out there. He's just been stellar. So we appreciate everybody's work. I know that all of you have also been contributing to the sales tax, or the referendum, the tax increase. And so hopefully we'll see the fruits of your labor, our labor tomorrow. So, Superintendent.
I'm good. I will wait till this evening.
Nothing? All right. Well, then we are adjourned. Thank you.